to this continent. Our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples whose land we are located. With deep respect, Moad acknowledges that even in virtual space, our people, our work, and our network servers are on native lands, and thank the indigenous people of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you, everyone. And of course, today, this segment of Art as We See It, we present pairings of art from publicly accessible archives and jazzy hip hop tracks. By the way, Dimitri, did you hear US Senate unanimously passed a resolution designating November as Hip Hop History Month?
Woohoo!
Yeah. And with that, can you introduce us to this program and let us know how you created this?
Sure, yeah. So I happened to be born right at the same time that hip hop was born. So I am definitely, if you want to call it, part of the hip hop generation, which began in the late 1970s. And really, jazz and hip hop are two of America's native art forms. And I think as we started this series a few months ago, or we've done this series, Art as We See It, since the beginning of the pandemic, which forced us into shelter in place. But really, for the last several months, we've been doing music. And I was like, I listen to a lot of hip hop, I love jazz, and I love art. So why not put them all together? So I'm just going to give a really quick overview of, kind of really the overlaps between jazz and hip hop. So as we all know, and I'm not going to go into any deep histories at all, this is very cursory, touching upon just the tip of the iceberg on these histories. Jazz really comes from combinations of African, Latin, and European elements in music. And hip hop, which began again in the 1970s, it has a very contested history. Some people say that it was really to express dissatisfaction in the American ghettos in the large city by African Americans and folks of Latinx experience or background. But one of the things to know about hip hop is that because of the recession we were experiencing in the 1970s, the instruments and musical education were pulled out of schools. And so folks, had no other choice but to turn to turntables and microphones because that's what they had readily available. Hip hop samples from everything, but I think some of the most interesting hip hop music is when they sample jazz. Again, possible, I looked up the history of the origins of hip hop, and everyone has their own story. Some people say that hip hop comes from scat from jazz, with, I guess, Louis Armstrong recorded the first scat radio or scat song to be recorded on a record. Some folks say it's folks like Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets and their musical style that inspired hip hop. Others say that it's Jamaican music, so particularly Jamaican reggae, where they didn't necessarily have the turntable skills that we all know of being able to mix songs, and so the DJ would start just talking over a record as he would change. The truth is that it probably comes from everything, right? Hip hop is this international music, but both grew out of the oppression of people, particularly African Americans in urban America, and both forms of music are protest music that really go against the grain and come up and have their own rules. So that's my really quick history. I hope everybody enjoys the pairings that we have, and let's go. Let's go for it.
Yeah, thank you for that. We love Dimitri history. And the first piece is this one. So let's see how, what you paired it with.
Lives they lay on these lines, waving signs other times. Many say the grind's on the mind. shorties blunted out and everyone wanna rhyme. Bush pushing lies, killers immortalized. We got arms but won't reach for the skies. Waiting for the Lord to rise. I looked into my daughter's eyes and realized I'ma learn through her. The Messiah might even return through her. If I'ma do it, I gotta change the world through her. Furs in the beds, Gramps wanting them. Demons and old friends, Pops, they hunting them. The chosen one from the land of the frozen sun.
So I love Basquiat. We had to start off with Basquiat because I'm obsessed with him. Not all folks love Basquiat. But I think we have to start off with Basquiat when we're talking about hip hop and art and the mashing up of the two because he really was the very first hip hop artist. I will not go into Basquiat's history because we will be here all day. But Basquiat, started off as a graffiti writer. I am really interested in the fact that he also was in the very first music video to ever be aired on MTV, which was actually a Blondie song. Go figure.
The
Turns
first
out
hip
that
hop video, right? The first hip hop video.
the very first hip hop video that ever aired on MTV. Not the very first hip hop video, but the one to air on MTV. And it was by Blondie, and her song Rapture. And so Grandmaster Flash was supposed to show up. This is before Basquiat is really famous and, has his own first solo show. And this piece right here, Untitled 1982, is a theme that Basquiat returns to over and over again. You can't quite tell from this image, but in all of his Untitles, particularly from 1982, the central figure is a skull. And curators and art historians have pulled this apart time and time again, and nobody knows because he didn't really say exactly what the skull represented. But in some iterations of it, there is still skin attached, there's still eyes, and so a lot of curators posit that the skull for him is kind of this blending between life and death, and him even thinking about his own mortality, like a memento mori, in some kinds of ways. The same title and subject matter is also the same thing for one of his most famous paintings to ever sell for 110 million in 2017 at Sotheby's, which also was the highest price of an artwork ever sold by an American artist to that date. And he still, I think Basquiat is still the top 6, in the most expensive selling works in the entire world. What else do I want to say about that? We can go into the whole thing with Basquiat, but in this one, there's all these things that are happening in the background. My assumption is that maybe he's looking through newspapers because Basquiat really liked to, put this stream of consciousness. That's the only thing I can figure for how you have fluid milk cream with these cities. Except for Babylon's in there, which is not a modern city. Maybe, in Rastafarian manner, he's thinking of Babylon as America or the Western world and its systems. And, he's got these series of numbers. So he was definitely going through something for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, that skull imagery that you've talked about. Some people also think it goes back to his father's voodoo roots. His father was from Haiti, and some people connected with that. But I also love there's another story, which is that when he was a kid, he was hospitalized after an accident, and his father brought him Grey's Anatomy, the book, not the TV show, and and that he would look at Grey's Anatomy, and sometimes you would see. Or some people think that those images of the skull that he would get from Grey's Anatomy would be adorning a lot of his work. I mean, it's really interesting because, he had a Puerto Rican mother, a Haitian father, and so he spoke 3 languages fluently. He was completely comfortable in French and Spanish as well as with English. And so he was one of these people that was just able to communicate to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And he was a real multi-talented guy. And I think that's part of what made him interesting. you say in that Rapture video that you see him spinning records. Well, he did actually do that, and he also got into a clothing line, and he started out as a graffiti artist, but he did a lot of other things as well. Kind of an interesting character.
Yeah, well, I also wonder about the colors in this one, the red and blue. On this one, red, blue, and white. For some reason, I can't unsee the stripes of the American or the US flag for this one. But, this next one is.
Wait. I'm so sorry. I didn't talk about the song real quick before we go on.
Oh, no, you haven't. Yeah, tell us about this song. Do you want to hear it again, or?
I mean, what do folks want to do? I don't know.
Sure.
Okay, let's hear it again, I think. Yeah.
Lives they lay on these lines, waving signs other times. Many say the grind's on the mind. Shorty's blunted out and everyone wanna rhyme. Bush pushing lies, killers immortalized. We got arms but won't reach for the skies. Waiting for the Lord to rise. I looked into my daughter's eyes and realized I'ma learn through her. The Messiah might even return through her. If I'ma do it, I gotta change the world through her. Furs in the bins, Gramps wanting them. Demons and old friends, pops they hunting them. The chosen one from the land of the frozen sun with drums.
Yeah, so that's the intro to Common's album B, which was his sixth studio album, and it's produced by Kanye West, with also guest appearances by Jay Dilla, and Jay Dilla will come up throughout our conversation, but Jay Dilla also was extremely important to modern hip hop. He's one of the founders of a certain style that you hear there, and the inclusion of jazz and really slowing the music down. We'll get to that again later, but yeah, had to talk about the song.
Thanks for that. And I'm going to move on to the next piece, which I'm excited about. And I would say I want to tell folks that after this presentation, in a couple of days, we'll send you the link to all of the music and all of the art if you joined us today. All right.
Dance as we dip in the melodic sea. Rhythm keeps flowing and drips to MC. Sweet sugar pop, rocks and pop. You don't stop till the sweet beat drops. I shall improve as I stick and move. Vivid poems recited on top of the groove. Smooth mind, floating like a butterfly. Notes set afloat, sung like a lullaby. Brace yourself as the beat.
Yeah. Look, Carissa, what do you say about this piece?
I say about this piece, organic shapes and splashes, lots of color. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of tie-dye, but a really, I don't know, just a really organic form of tie-dye. And I like the way that initially your eyes kind of try to take it all in at one time because there's just so much to see. And then you kind of find a resting place in those two orange areas, and that kind of gives you the license to take it in now bit by bit. And you start to see the placement, like of the turquoise and the yellows, and then, as all of that's coming in, it kind of takes on a symmetry to the piece, and you're able to feel the movement of the piece. And the really cool thing about this painting and others like it is it becomes new every time it's installed, because of course, when he hangs them, he can't hang them in just the exact same way. And so it becomes this new thing. And so it also its composition kind of is informed by the space where it's hung. So if it's hung in a place that has high ceilings, it looks one way. If it's in a place that has lower ceilings, it looks a different way. Or if he's installed it in an outside form, it looks a totally different way. So it's just really cool. And I also was reading about how he creates this. I mean, number one, these are huge. They're just massive. And he actually folds them and squeezes them and puts knots in them, and then he puts, he applies the color while it's still wet. He refolds and reknots, and he just continues to do it until he gets the look that he's looking for, the feel that he's looking for. He said initially when he started doing this kind of work, and I'm sorry, I keep saying it's Sam Gilliam. When he initially started doing this type of work, he said he was doing it because he had a desire to just let things go and to give it that feel of the jazz masters such as, John Coltrane, whose music he always played in his studio. And so he just wanted to create that free kind of feeling, which it's just absolutely beautiful. One interesting thing to note is that Gilliam actually started out using watercolor as a way to learn about staining, and then he moved from doing that to doing what he called beveled edge paintings as a way of learning how to deal with space. And then he moved to his draped, which is what he calls his draped paintings. He said, and with these, he wanted to show what it meant to come from the floor and go into space, which I just thought was a really interesting concept. And one funny thing about Gilliam, someone was interviewing him, and he said that it had been told to him that he danced way better than he painted. And his response was, "Not so. I do both well." I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's just really interesting to note that Gilliam was the first person to do this, to take the canvas. This is canvas, just like you would see on a painting. He's the first person to take the canvas off the stretchers, and so he's really doing something sculptural with something that's traditionally associated with painting. I find that really interesting. I also find it really interesting that one of his early influences was Muhammad Ali's father, who I had no idea that this was true, but he did murals for the church in Tupelo, Mississippi, which is where Sam Gilliam was born. I think the churches were in Tupelo, Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. And so I find that really interesting. And, the other thing is he talks about, really enjoying people like Giotto and Tintoretto, who are these, really early, in some ways, pre-Renaissance paintings. And one of the things he liked about them was the flatness of their painting. I mean, if you look at those pre-Renaissance paintings, they really haven't learned the lessons of perspective yet. So they really do really flat. So here's this guy who loves these flat-looking paintings, and yet what does he do? He makes them the opposite of flat, but he literally is turning them sculptural. So I thought that was really interesting about him.
I just want to add to, Lucreza shared this with a video of him with us, and he learned drawing, or he practiced drawing on drawing the milkman's horse. And so it was kind of refreshing to kind of hear about that. But he and then later on used his art as kind of a rejection to other people's criticism of what art should be and how art should be. And so goes with what Charlie just said. And I want to hear the music pairing so badly right now, Dimitri. Why did you pair it with this piece by US?
Yeah, when I think about jazzy hip hop, I have to think of this Us3 song that I think it was even in commercials in the 90s, is what I remember. And I actually think it may be the one hit wonder of Us3. And it just that just that movement, that the song implies makes me think of this piece. And Gilliam talks about how he would just listen to jazz as he's making his art, and that sense of improvisation would guide his process. So yeah, I just think it was a good pairing in my mind, but I don't know what other people think. Maybe you don't think it was so great.
Perfect pairing.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like it. We do have some comments in chat. JT says it's ahead of its time, yet timeless. And Anissa says, I like how it feels heavy and light at the same time, like it could fly away if it could lift the heavy part. So it's a very
Yes.
engaging piece.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is one of those pieces that, you really have to see, not this piece in specific, but his work is work that you really have to see live to really, just like any sculpture, you get to move around it, look at how light plays on different, crevices and corners of it. It's really beautiful work.
The comments are really popping. Thank you. Yeah, and Wayne says, I remember being disappointed that hip hop didn't spread out to the US3 example at the time. It's there now in many ways, but it took decades. Thank you for that. All right. So here, I think the sound was a little bit soft on this one. I'm sorry, I couldn't make it any louder, but let me see. I think, let's see. Let's try it. Any better?
Yeah.
Okay.
We like the breeze, float straight out of our lids. Them, they got booed by these hard rock Brooklyn kids. Us floor rush when they DJ booming classics. You dig the crew on the fattest hip hop record. He touch the kinks and sinks into the sounds. She frequents deep, fatter joints called undergrounds. Our funk zooms like you hit the Mary Jane. They flock to booms, man, boogie had to change.
All right, I think we know this song as Cool Like That. But I want to ask folks quickly, what material do you think that the artist used to make this? Because I was completely fooled by this piece. So what materials do you think they used? Okay, yep. Miriam says chalk, yeah. All right, chalk, all right.
Yeah, my initial thought was pastel.
Me too, mine too, yeah.
Charcoal. First impression was paint, but yes, chalk. Oh, someone sees cloth.
Watercolor too. Huh. This piece surprised me. It's oil on canvas backed vinyl. And so I kind of looked into the canvas backed vinyl, and I realized that might be what is giving us this kind of pastel kind of texture. So it's such a soft yet really sharp work, and I really, really enjoy it. And something about the subject here is that's Fab Five Freddy, who promoted art and hip hop, graffiti art from New York, from Puerto Rican and African American communities in New York. He is responsible for putting that kind of art into really nice galleries, inside galleries and museums. And this artist, Jane Dixon, kind of pays an homage to what he has done by painting him here. And I kind of like that history, the connection that it has with hip hop, but also I'm so curious about the use of materials and how you can make oil paint, look like pastel or chalk art. That's kind of fascinating with me. And yeah, what do you folks think?
Today I'm really intrigued by the framing of this, the cropping of it, the way the words, we only get parts of the words, and we kind of the way he's juxtaposed against this these signs in the background. I think it's really intriguing. And she's kind of cut off the top of his head.
Right.
You know, he's bigger than life. You know, he's bursting out of the frame of this picture.
Right. Yeah. I think it's such a great painting. And Dimitri, you want to talk about Fab Five Freddy and the music a little bit?
I mean, I think you kind of captured it today, and that Fab Five Freddy was also in the Blondie video. So everyone needs to go watch that Rapture video, because he's right. I'm obsessed with it. I think I need to write a whole thesis about just that video. But yeah, he was just a connector. He was that person who really paved the way. It's the Rapture by Blondie from 1981. And I think he just really paved the way. You think about someone like Basquiat, who was initially rejected by both MoMA and by the Whitney. They didn't want his art in their museums. But Fab Five Freddy was this connector who brought the art from the street into the galleries, as today said. He was the first VJ for MTV Raps. I mean, Fab Five Freddy literally does everything. Yes, and Blondie mentions his name in that song. That's how she starts off her rap. Yes, you're right, Wynn.
I think I'll share that video, the link to that video in the email following this presentation, just because it's so interesting. And the next piece is this one.
Section 80s, baby, play Ronald breaking, we breaking.
Lord forbid, the homie got wet, so we tryna soak it in. The president is black, but you can't vote for skin. You vote for the better man. Come to our show, you can see the diversity. Unify the people, they gon' peep it universally. We might not change the world, but we gon' manipulate it. I hope you participate in. Hey, yo, Doc, won't you let these cats know? We knew we'd be here like back in 04. Started high power cause a generation needed a generator and a system made to disintegrate us. And all we do is a system. We're not...
I think I have this with Lucurisa, right?
Yes.
Do you want to start off?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I'll start off. So when I first saw this, I have to say, I created just this whole scenario of what was going on. First and foremost, I really liked how the little splashes of color it kind of was reminiscent of the bits and pieces that make the whole. And nothing is ever just kind of like a flat color. You see how he takes bits of color to bring depth to the image. And one of the things that struck me immediately is the shirt with the numbers across his chest looking like prison clothing. And, looking at what it's called, his day in court, and then seeing this prison clothing kind of symbolized for me, the injustice of being found guilty before even getting to tell your side of the story in court. And then the next thing that captured my attention was the word glass that was stenciled inside what appears to be the form of a wine glass. So then I have questions. It's like, well, does this mean that somehow alcohol has played a part in this scene? I'm not sure. Food for thought. Then I see the hand behind the wine glass with the black and blue cuff seemingly reaching for the subject's manhood. And it's like, so is that an indication that the system has him in a place where he's unable to maneuver? I wondered what SS meant. Is it Secret Service? Was this an indication that they had something to do with? I had all kinds of questions. And then, of course, in the A in the upper right corner symbolizing Exhibit A, America somehow being a part of this exhibit. Like I said, lots and lots of questions. And then, I see the skull and I'm trying to figure out who the skull is, what the skeleton is, and what was the picture in the center of his hand. Then my mind exploded because I found out that the painting was actually based on a specific event. And that this work is Jeff Donaldson's interpretation of a photograph that was taken at a 1970 Marin County courthouse incident. Now, personally, I had never even heard of this. I'm sad to say that, I guess I just wasn't in tune with what was going on at this time. But you can see the original newspaper photograph in the center of the hand, and the figure on the left in the artwork has his left hand outstretched, and the source of the image is in the palm. And so, in the original photograph, the man on the left is James McClain, and in both images, he's holding a gun in his right hand, pointed eye level towards the figure on the right, which is the Superior Court Judge Harold Haley. And so apparently what happened is that they actually, J.D. McClain and the judge presiding over his murder trial were in a standoff, and they both ultimately were killed along with others, which is, it's just, wow, mind-boggling. All of the symmetry, all of the symbolism that's in this piece. And apparently this was motivated by a young 17-year-old man by the name of Jonathan Jackson, who was trying to negotiate freedom for his brother, and his older brother, George Jackson, which I'm sure we've all heard of. And kind of to put the cherry on the top, this event actually was a precursor to the subsequent manhunt and trial of Angela Davis. So this is just a very, very powerful piece, and just food for thought. Food for thought.
Yes, I love hearing the story, Luke, what he said. So many connections to our local history in the Bay Area and our icon, Angela Davis. And I just kind of want to point out, Jeff Donaldson is just brilliant. I'm obsessed with him. And just that amount of history that you could, pull out of this one image, and all the commentary. The number on the prison shirt is 8/1970, because the event that Lucurisa talked about happened in August of 1970. So he's just pulling so much in. And 1970 is also the same year that Donaldson became the chair of Howard University. For folks who don't know, Donaldson is one of the founders of the Black Arts Movement of the 1960s and 70s. He is co-founder of AfriCobra, the African Commune of Bad Relevant Artists, and just really defined this whole movement in the 60s and 70s, when Black artists wanted to create their own aesthetic. They wanted to draw from African history and really talk about the struggle and the oppression of African Americans and Black people throughout the world, which was very, so this movement was happening at the same time that, African Americans were also investigating abstraction, and there was these polar movements. Anyway, I could go off about Donaldson for hours. We don't have time.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for all that history. And gosh, it just, just looking at art, and we look at art, but then seeing art and understanding art. Thank you for your help with that. I really appreciate it. Just hearing the history. I'm with Pamela. I love hearing.
And I'm sorry, and I totally forgot. Yeah. I keep forgetting every single time.
Oh,
the song was Kendrick Lamar, Ab-Soul's outro. And, talking about someone who is contemporaneously blending together hip hop and jazz, you can't not talk about Kendrick Lamar, who is working with saxophonist Kamasi Washington, his bassist Stephen Thundercat Bruner, and also who also contributes to Flying Lotus, if we're talking about contemporary music right now. And not taking records and sampling them, but having live jazz musicians who grew up in the hip hop era and influenced by hip hop bring that jazz to the stage with him and his lyricism. He's amazing.
Thank you.
UNITY, that's a unit.
Uh, this
Queen
piece.
of, yeah, Queen of Soul. Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, so it's Aretha Mysterious Lady of Sorrows, by Douglas Bourgeois. Um, and we all had so many questions about this piece also. I'll just say that it feels very inspired by Chicano art of the same era. Especially with the flaming heart in the center. I can't help, but maybe it's the California in me, the California born and raised. Um, the artist Douglas Bourgeois is represented by Arthur Roger Gallery in New Orleans. He's still alive and working. And in this piece, Aretha is surrounded by symbols and references to both her life and her music. So the piano keys, we all know that she's a piano player. There's also these chains. I think Charlie was immediately thinking chain, 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 chain of fools with that. Keyboards, the thorns, and also a Sacred Heart. So, why did all this come together? The title of this piece, Mysterious Lady of Sorrow, actually comes from Jerry Wexler. So, he was Aretha's producer from Atlantic in her first albums in 1967. And in a Rolling Stone interview, he says, I think of Aretha as Our Lady of Mysterious Sorrows. He goes on to say, her eyes are incredible, luminous eyes covering inexplicable pain. Her depression could be as deep as the dark sea. I don't pretend to know the sources of her anguish, but anguish surrounds Aretha as surely as the glory of her musical aura. And, I think Bourgeois took that quote and, put it into his work in, I think, a really beautiful way. Who am I sharing this piece with? Is it you today?
I think it's Lucreza, and I maybe, but I'm also, with this piece, the questions that I had was, I didn't know much about Aretha's life also, and so it kind of you brought that to light with me, but um, also kind of it reminds me of Lady of Guadalupe from Mexico, like you said, Chicano art, that kind of art, the thorn around her, and kind of this regal look that she has. I don't know. I enjoy this piece, but it also poses some sort of problematic thing with me. Yeah, it's challenging. It's a challenging piece for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's really interesting. And I was really excited to see this in Smithsonian American Art Museum's archives, where we found it at. It's a painting, but it also is one of those that it very much feels like pastel to me, or
Mm.
airbrush even. Of course, I'm thinking of Chicano art with the airbrushing kind of on the side of vans and things. Um,
I
but
have
yeah,
a
he
question about
certainly
the
has to
music.
be.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yes. Oh, go ahead. What was your question?
Oh, about the music and how you paired it, but Queen Latifah, Unity. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we talk about loving Queen Latifah all the time. So, how can you talk about hip hop and jazz and not talk about Queen Latifah? For me, when I hear this song, which I grew up listening to as a teenager, I don't think I noticed all the jazz that's infused in the
Mm.
song, which is actually sampled from Message from Inner City by the Crusaders, which is a Houston-based jazz group. And also, kind of one of the things is like Queen Latifah is talking about, wanting respect for women. So we know
Mm.
the early 90s hip hop changes and it becomes, gangster rap becomes the thing. And there's a lot of references that denigrate Black women in those songs. And so this is Queen Latifah's direct response. We did not play the full lyrics. This was the edited version. But she says the B word and also HO, which I will not repeat on here because there's probably kids on here. But one of the interesting things for me also with this song was because she was speaking up for women's rights. When this song came out in '93, it would play on the radio unedited. And if you look, I nerded out and looked up censorship So the B word is not allowed on American television until 1998. So 5 years before that, the radio was able to play that word. And I don't know if everyone remembers, you cannot always say lots and lots of curse words on television until like the late 90s. And there's like 2 words that are excluded. But, looking into the history, it was because she was speaking up for women's rights and these words that were hurled at them constantly.
That is just awesome. Thanks, Dimitri. Dimitri always has a background. You just have to ask. He always has history in his pocket. Let's look at this piece.
I reminisce for a spell, or shall I say think back 22 years ago to keep it on track. The birth of a child on the 8th of October. A toast, but my granddaddy came sober. Count all the bits at the toes. Now I suppose you hope the little black boy grows. 18 years younger than my mama, but I really got beatings cause the girl loved drama. In single parenthood, there I stood. By the time she was 21, had another one. This one's a girl.
So this is
Charlie, I think it's you and I, right? For this one?
You and I?
I think this is ours.
Yeah.
I want to ask folks.
Yeah, this is
Quickly,
Robert Young. Yeah.
We're just cutting each other
He's
off.
a Canadian artist. He's from Vancouver. He's still alive. And it's very, very hard to find very much information about him. I know that he is very important in the art community, teaching community in Canada. But what we have here is we have this work that's very common in his work. He often uses appropriated images of saxophone players, and in this particular image we have Charlie Parker. Robert Young is the artist, and Charlie Parker is who he's using the photo. And if you look at his work, he uses a lot of collage type effects where he'll put in a saxophonist. But the other thing that he does a lot of this sort of indoor-outdoor type of stuff where you'll see something going on within a house and then outside the house. So here we have this, I don't know, it looks like a very odd, we were talking earlier about whether this could be like a Spanish castle. I'm not up on my castle architecture. So if anyone in the audience has better thoughts about where you might see something like this. But, you have this sort of very intimate inside where someone is doing his art, he's doing his saxophone, he's playing inside. And then outside, we have this very, very, I don't want to say jarring, but jarring in the sense that it's just completely different than what we'd expect to see outside of this person's window. So I think it's a really, so Dimitri feels like he gets Tudor vibes from this. Again, I don't know enough about castles to be able to know. And he says, I don't know my castle architecture either. So, I don't know, but it makes for an interesting effect. And when you look at some of his other work, he uses these multiple rooms, which are clearly not realistic. They have juxtapositions in them that are unusual. So it's fun to look at some of his other work. It's someone who I had never heard of before.
Charlie, do you think that you also get the feeling that they clash as well? Because I think that precise, given that it's screen print on paper, that precise kind of Renaissance art in the background, and then we have this super modern looking pink shirt, just like it just pops. And I don't know, they go really well together for me, and just in terms of colors working together, but in the idea they clash. And I think he's trying to make a statement in that. And I saw in one really old article that what he might be trying to do is also have them have this kind of timelessness about the two art forms, which is the music part, the contemporary then of music, and the Renaissance art that's in the back, kind of engaging both as timelessness, timeless, to communicate timelessness. And so to me, it's just like, are they supposed to clash? Because they go together for me. Yeah.
I think certainly. color-wise, it clashes for me. And
Yeah.
Wynn has just added a comment that she says, I love that he added unsuspecting colors of orange and pink to a figure like Bird, whom we usually see in photos of sepia and darker hues. And I think that's a great observation. To me, it really looks like the kind of image that you would see with like a really strong spotlight on stage. You really do get the sense that it's a picture that's taken on stage, and yet he's using that very vibrant reddish pink color. To me, it's a very odd juxtaposition. I don't know that I have an answer for it, but it really makes me think, and it puts me in an unusual sort of abstract thinking position, which I think is interesting.
It's such a contrast. So maybe what he's going for is the contrast. Because the green really it's kind of the opposite color of the red.
Yeah, and for me, it's that blue that picks up the pink, the blue in the sky that just picks up the pink. But we can talk about this piece for a while, because also the screen printing technique, the layers of it to get to this point, I just admire that. Also, I want to know about the music pairing for sure.
So, I love that you're talking about these odd juxtapositions. So, the song is They Reminisce Over You by Pete Rock and CL Smooth, which was not a chart topper by any means, but if you grew up, watching MTV Raps, this song. And actually the saxophone and bass samples are actually from Tom Scott's cover of Today by Jefferson Airplane. So take Jefferson Airplane's Today and put that into hip hop, and there's another odd juxtaposition for you.
Nice pairing. Yeah, nice pairing. We have a couple more pieces to go, and
when you're feeling berserk, I don't really mind if it's over your head, cause the job of resurrectors is to wake up the dead. So pay attention, it's not hard to decipher, and after the horns you can check out the Viper. Sideways, but competition they must come straight way. Competition them try to come sideways.
This is Charlie and Lucreza. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Do you want to start, Lucreza, and I'll chime in?
Sounds good. So this is Mark Bradford's Amendment 8. And, when I just first looking at it, it just feels chaotic and restless and just, almost violent. And I found his work really interesting. Number one, because it's really layered, and apparently, though he calls his work paintings, it's never really the primary medium that he uses. He uses all kinds of, he uses string and wire and billboard paper and materials that he finds in the neighborhood. He just salvaged elements, and then he sands them down and causes it to reveal layer upon layer of this multicolored salvaged elements. So it's really interesting. And this particular piece, Amendment 8, actually comes from a series that he created that was inspired by the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, known, of course, as the Bill of Rights. And he states, let me say what the 8th Amendment actually states, that the excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. And you can kind of see that in the text that he has on this particular piece. Some pieces are kind of visible, some are barely visible. And it's said that he actually did that on purpose because it spoke to kind of how we look how Americans in general kind of look at the amendments, the Constitution in general, where some of it makes perfect sense, and then there are other parts that don't make much sense to some of us. And so he kind of uses that. What I also found interesting was I thought that this initially was actual paint, but it turns out that this is paper. It's layer upon layer upon layer of paper, which he stands down so that it begins to resemble paint. And I thought that was really fascinating that you would just take that much layers and layers and layers and then sand it down and it comes out looking like this painting. It's very visceral, this piece. And for me, it just seems extremely violent.
Well, I would agree. I mean, he really is using those colors that are evocative of, blood or fire or flame, things like that. So, Dave, if you could go sort of pan back out to the full view of it, full view. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, what I see when I look at the entire piece and I scrunch up my eyes a little bit is it really looks like a giant bug to me. It's almost like you can see, the head of the bug on the right side, and then these antennae coming off. So, for me, it's a really interesting work when you look at it in sort of a gross way. I mean, he's an interesting artist, and he's someone who's so hot right now in the art world. His work is going, for a tremendous amount of money. And again, whenever I say that, I always qualify that. To me, at least, the amount of money someone gets is not necessarily indicative of the quality of the work that you're seeing. But I think he's someone who really does bring a lot of interest. And he grew up in L.A. His mom was a hairdresser, and he used to work in her hair salon. And one of the things that he used to do is he would collect bits of hair or papers that would be used for processing hair, and then he would use both the hair or the papers in his work. We've had a couple of his pieces at MOAD where you can see some of that, and we have a couple of people. Rodney and I both work at SF MoMA, and we've had some of his work there, and you can really see the different layers of material that he's adding onto it. And he's someone that I think really often photographs of his work don't do it justice, because you look at it and you think, oh, whatever. But then when you're up close to it, you can see the sort of textural subtleties that he has to his work. This one is actually much more color-wise, much more vibrant than I'm used to seeing from him. So I think he's an interesting artist. He's someone that if you don't know, you should look into a little bit, because he's someone who's in the conversation very frequently when talking about contemporary artists.
We don't have the measurements. Oh, sorry, we don't have the measurements here, but they're also really grand in scale.
Yeah.
These pieces are really big. Yeah, Lucas, you were going to say, you're going to add.
I was just going to say, I haven't seen one of his pieces in person, but I would love to, because I was trying to imagine, just by looking at this photograph of it, how it was texturally, because if you're using all of these different things, even though you're sanding them down, there's got to be just a insane amount of texture to these pieces. And so I would just love to see one in person.
And the music pairing for this one.
The music pairing is.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that, Dimitri.
A Tribe Called Quest. We've got the Jazz, which is the second single off of the Low End Theory album. And the music that you hear is Pete Rock, and I think, Pete Rock sampled like 15 different things to create it. So even when you look it up, it's just attributed to Pete Rock. You can't really quite. He didn't just pull something and slow it down from a single album. He took lots of elements and put them together, which I think also speaks to what the artist is also doing.
Thank you, Dimitri. Dimitri, we both have to talk about Dr. Fahamu Peku's art. I just think that, I mean, it's complex. It's beautiful. There's gold, the back that you see in the back is gold leafed. And then we see this urban outfit, a young person wearing urban outfit, kind of floating in air. And Dr. Fahamu Peku is an artist, is an intellectual, a museum director, owner, and so many wonderful things that he does. But he also channels hip hop music and hip hop culture to talk about what he calls oppositional fashion. He uses sagging to show the oppositional fashion. He uses sagging, as you can see here, as an allegory of resistance, because what happens, he says, what if we spoke to young men differently? Could they defy gravity? And that's the question that he kind of poses with these pieces, which are large paintings with these young men kind of floating up in air, elevated up in air. And he questions Black men and masculinity, the performance of Black men and masculinity, and does humanity, does respect only belong to folks that are dressed, or Black men that are dressed in suits? And so there's just layers of ideas and thoughts that are brought up by his pieces. And this piece is called But I'm Still Fly. Yeah. Dimitri, you want to tell us a little bit more? Because Dimitri interviewed Dr. Fahamu Peku, and we have that on our YouTube channel as well. We were so lucky to meet the artist. Yeah.
I think today you really captured it very, very well. We are big fans of Dr. Fahamu. I actually watched him painting live on his Instagram earlier today. So I encourage people to check him out. This piece is also currently on view at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. They bought it directly from his exhibition, Gravity. Right after it was painted. And you can go view it in DC right now. The music pairing is The Roots, Asewa Man. And, I just think The Roots are this band that really, really immediately from their onset, thought about blending jazz and live performance. If you watch the Jimmy Kimmel Show, you know who the Roots are. And I also thought, it's important, maybe that was your first introduction to who they are, to know that they existed way before that, into the early 90s as this band that blended live musicianship with the turntables, with hip hop. And the song we were listening to was recorded live at the Trocadero in Philadelphia in front of over 1,700 fans. And I just think that sense of experimentation, of elevating hip hop, culture, beyond just probably what people thought about hip hop in the early 90s, is the same thing that Dr. Fahamu Peku does in all of his work in elevating artists and the culture.
Yes, and if you happen to be in Atlanta, visit the museum. Don't know off the top of my head the name of it, but yes, please check out Dr. Fahamu Peku. You'll be very happy you did. The next artist.
Miss Tanzania, she a do or die. Says she wanna know more about the Sukuma tribe. We hit the zoo, once wasn't enough. Got an ocean full of knowledge, you could scuba dive. Miss Ethiopia can play so jazzy, then sit you down to school you on Selassie. Tell them you're nothing without a woman, no. Woman to woman, I just wanna see you glow. Tell them what's up.
So, So this piece, first of all, Ida Mulune, the artist, I desperately, desperately want her to belong to Ethiopia, right? She's undoubtedly, she's an Ethiopian artist, but I have to admit she is an international artist, and she is more so a artist of the continent of Africa. And so I'm sitting here kind of looking at this piece, trying to identify the things that make it Ethiopian, that don't make it Ethiopian, that make it African. But really, when I found out what Ida Mulune is communicating with us in this piece, my mind was just blown. She had access to, I think through her friend, a collection of photographs that were taken by foreign photographers of Ethiopian and Eritrean women. And so that then where we come to this thing, the white gaze or the foreign gaze, really. And when you think about that, what is she doing in this painting to kind of challenge the distant, what she calls the distant gaze? And in this picture, I feel that the woman is owning herself. She is seeing herself as she wants to be seen, and she's showing herself as she wants to be shown. And of course, she incorporates a lot of the traditional face adornments and body adornments, the paintings, and that hairdo that's very specific to the Ethiopian Eritrean hairdo, that braid that happens. She also flips that over because that poofy part is supposed to be at the bottom, at the nape of the neck kind of thing. And so I it's empowering. I look at this image, and it's kind of a self-determined kind of piece, and I appreciate that. And also with Ida Mulune, something that I also learned is that she incorporates the body adornments and other things that she puts in her paintings. She searches for them throughout the continent of Africa, or she sources them and she gets inspired by them, by cultures and traditions across Africa. And the female body, the Black female body, has been a subject with her, and in this set of pieces that are called the distant gaze, you can also see many memory of hope. Many sets that she has, you can see how she starts a conversation with a Black female body. And so, yeah, this piece, I absolutely, I mean, is it a photography? Is it a painting? That's also something that is it a sculpture piece? If you think about it, is it a performance piece at the same time captured with a camera? So I appreciate it. Any thoughts?
Yeah, for me, I just add that, I mean, I can't help it, maybe because I'm so stuck in America. But whenever I see red, white, and blue, it immediately becomes political. And I'm sure she knows that, and not just necessarily thinking about American, but also thinking about, the UK, thinking about all the other Western countries that are red, white, and blue as well. And just the potency of those three colors in combination, for me, they're always political. And so, I don't know what she has written about this piece or stated about this piece, but I feel like she has to be at least critiquing or in conversation with the West in some form.
I think she often does that, because also the postcards that used to be sold with these photos are sold in the West. Kind of these photos that people would take of women in that region, and kind of what she would call striptease kind of. And so I think, and also her background of kind of Europe and here in North America. She lived in Canada. She was born in Ethiopia in the 70s, in the late 70s. And so it just kind of, I think she puts the colors of her journey together as well in these pieces. So yeah, there's from my country person. Yeah, I would hear. Yes, go ahead, Charlie.
Well, when I look at this, I immediately think of Magritte. Just the fact that she's in a room with clouds and sitting in this kind of chair, and so she's, to me, I think she's also nodding to the whole surrealist movement when she's doing a piece like this. So I really think she's really looking at very many different directions when she's doing this work.
My question is, why is the floor like, the floor is a little uneven? It's just a very intriguing choice.
Yeah. Is it paper? Is it linoleum kind of? I think it's painted paper or plastic. I'm also trying to see if the lines are intentionally painted in that way, or yeah.
It's a fascinating image. Like I would love to tour a group in a gallery and talk. I'm sure we could spend a lot of time on this image.
Yeah. Yeah. Dimitri, about the music?
Yeah, the music, this is from the album Sometimes I'm Introvert and I'm not even going to attempt to say her full name, by Little Sims is her rap name. And she is a British Nigerian, specifically Yoruba descended rapper that I have recently become super obsessed with. If you ever watch the Netflix series Top Boy, she is an actor in that series as well. I love that series, so I'm just gonna promote. I just think she's amazing, and she even like has had a song in the film Venom. She's performing on a stage in there. She's very cool, very young, up and coming, and this album was just dropped in 2021.
Just to clarify, Dimitri did not get paid by Venom or Top Boy.
Exactly. I love that show, though. I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah. We have two more pieces, and this is one of the two. Thank you for staying with us. It's incredible to see the chat, and yeah, let's listen to this.
Afro blow. Two worlds are face to face with undulating grace. Your jelly sway slip away to some secluded place. Shades of delight, cold view, rich as the night. Afro blue.
Yeah, this image, I maybe we should zoom out of it, but I'm really,
sure.
The question I have about this image is how do you think it was created? Because we see all these different shapes forming this face, different colors, different shapes, almost like a shadow. Who do we think this person is? I don't know the answer to that question. A lot of interesting choices, and really just a really intriguing image of well, the other question is who, without knowing who this woman is, what can we guess about her? Like what's her what's her temperament? What kind of a person is she? See if there's any prideful, grounded. Yeah, like I get a badass.
Dimitri says badass.
So you get a real sense of strength. This is a strong woman, a Black woman. I thought of Angela Davis, who I know we talked about a little bit earlier. Kind of resembles her. But I haven't found anything that says explicitly who this is. It's just called Artie Centerpiece. I know that Nelson Stevens was a teacher who was in public schools for many years, and then had an art career after that, and was eventually in some universities. And he created a number of images that kind of have this style.
Ronnie, I read something that just was kind of interesting to me because I like to hear how people started their art career, right? So what he used to do was that he with his friends back in New York, he used to draw with chalk, and they would draw this large drawing on the sidewalk, and they would go up to the roof or the rooftop and look down to see what it looks like. And I have a feeling it's I have to almost zoom out of this to see or squint my eyes to see the whole picture without looking at each separate piece. And it's always interesting to me how something that we experiment with, where something we try in our youth kind of stays with us, and we continue to perfect it. And yeah, I like that very much. I like that storyline, and when I look at this, that's what it reminds me of Professor Stevens. Yeah.
So if you're really close up to this, you're not going to get a sense of what it is, of who it is,
Yeah.
and then you have to step back.
Yeah.
Well, Doreen in the chat says that it reminds her of a photo she's seen of Toni Morrison, and Pamela agrees.
And so maybe this started off as a photograph, and then he does things to abstract from that. Oh, Ron's great. This is a comment that I really love. Reminds me of 60s psychedelic rock posters, such as those of Jimi Hendrix.
Oh yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. Yeah. And Deirdre, tell us about Erykah Badu, the choice that you made with it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was definitely the Afro. Going off of that, so the song Afro Blue with Robert Glasper, and I kept trying to Robert Glasper and Erykah Badu. And I remember when that album came out in 2012, and I just kept trying to find this interview where I remember, Robert Glasper, who, again, just kind of the king of blending together hip hop and jazz. But when he created his album Black Radio, he talks about how or that's not the song, sorry, that's one of the tracks, that's the one he did with Mos Def on the album. What is the name of the album? It's escaping me right now.
We forgive you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm like, that's another song on the radio, I'm sorry, on the album. But he talks about how somewhere years ago, is that the name of was it Black Radio? I know that's one of the songs that he did, but maybe that is the title also. Thanks, Wen. But he talks about, just so someone's gonna find it or be able to tell me about it, where he just invites Erykah Badu. She happened to be on her Rock the Bells tour. He gets her into the studio and is like, Erykah, you're gonna do Afro Blue, which is a song written by Mungo Santa Maria and popularized by John Coltrane. She's like, this is a jazz song. I'm not a jazz singer. And he's like, you got it. And anyway, don't quote me on it. Maybe it was an interview, but they just did the whole thing in one cut, is what you hear. So it's very much in the improvisational spirit of what jazz is and what hip hop is, and of course the Afro blue. And there's a lot of blue in this Afro in this image.
Yes. And our last piece, I almost don't want this to end. I'm just having such a great time.
My Abby says, shine your light on the world. Shine your light for the world to see. I'm on Black People. My dreamer says, shine your light on the world. Shine your light for the world to see. My elder says, shine your light on the world. Shine your light for the world to see. I want Black people to be free, to be free, to be free. For my people to be free, to be.
So I think this is me and Dimitri.
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go. So this is Remembering Uma, and it was done by Norman Dexter, which there is not a whole lot out there about him, the artist. He's also known as C'est la Soul of the Brush. He's a visual artist. He's a live painter. He's a muralist. I saw a lot of his other art, but there was no like real information about him. So can't really give much on that. My impression of this, though, just this for me, it's such an emotional piece for me. When I look at this imagery, the first time I'm seeing that it's kind of like the quintessential imagery of a lower income kind of ghetto neighborhood, and you see the abandoned buildings. And well, let me back up a little bit. This is a portrait of Jay Dilla, and we know that Jay Dilla is from Detroit, Michigan. And so when I see this, it kind of reminds me of that, like I said, the ghetto neighborhoods. Looking at the sky, which is kind of reminiscent of what a sky looks like just after the sun has set. And in this case, we know that Jay Dilla has joined the ancestors. And so, in essence, it's kind of saying to me that, he is the son of Detroit that has now set. The doves that are there typically signify the heavenly realm. And it's really interesting to know that the name Dilla actually means a small winged one. So, putting all of that together. And then we see the small kneeling figure to the left of the water tower, perhaps an aspiring athlete using resources available to hone his skill, like running across rooftops and things of that nature. We see the wooden water towers that, for me, somehow kind of spoke of the whole Detroit, Michigan water issues that we know are currently going on. The abandoned buildings signifying the auto industry, which kind of abandoned them. And then, how the artist made Jay Dilla kind of larger than life. And for me, that spoke of him becoming larger than where he was from. And now he watches over his city. And I'm just going to kind of leave it at that because, like I said, for me, this is just a really emotional piece.
Oh, that was beautiful, Lucarisa. Yeah, Jay Dilla is just an innovator in music. I think we'll send the Robert Glasper 30-minute video about jazz where he talks about Jay Dilla and his style of music. And I think Dilla just completely changed, or JD as he's affectionately known, just completely changed hip hop as we know it by taking samples from jazz and slowing them down, and taking even smaller amounts, not cutting them, not chopping them up in any kind of way. And he died of lupus and a rare blood disease, which I won't even try to say. I think it's TTP for short. Maybe Charlie knows as our resident physician. And the song that's paired with it is Umi Says by Mos Def, which actually was the song I heard that made me think about this whole thing about jazzy hip hop. And Umi in Arabic means mother. So when he's talking about Umi Says, he's talking about his mother says. And really important part is that Mos Def is saying he wants all Black people to be free. That song later shows up in a Air Jordan ad, which I think made it Mos Def's most popular song, where he took out that political thing. He also showed up on Conan O'Brien and didn't say Black people. He just, kind of garbles his words when he gets to that part. And it's really interesting because now we're in this very political place where someone can say, I just want Black people to be free. That's all that I want. And that's what he says. I think that's also what Jay Dilla did with his music.
That's a beautiful, beautiful ending. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us. I know this was a special conversation, so we kind of stayed for a little bit. Thank you, Dimitri, for putting this together. It's been amazing. And Charlie, Lucrecia, and Rodney for such a wonderful program. By the way, our docents are volunteers who give their time and expertise generously, and I would like to thank them with you. And of course, I thank you for joining us today. And to be honest, it's just not us fun without you. So I'm glad that you sign up for these programs and you join us monthly. And with that said, if you would like to continue to support our museum, there are many ways, and to name the three, if you are in the Bay Area, come and see us. And if you can text to donate, any amount is welcome and appreciated, and it allows us to do these types of free programs. And number three is become a member of the museum and reap the benefits. Thanks again, and see you in December, and we'll send you the link for the December program. We appreciate you all.